CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Hey folks, good morning. It's Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. We've got a lot of great stories coming up, including the Agent Tesla Trojan. We've got a new update on the SolarWinds breach, and now China is in the mix, something I've been saying for nearly 2 months now. Trickbot malware is getting much more upgraded, and Google issues a bunch of patches for Android. We're going to get to all of that here during today's show, so make sure you stick around. Thanks so much for tuning in this morning. Before we get started, though, if you're watching us live, we're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can comment, ask questions. We'll try to address those during the show, but please make sure to comment and subscribe for our podcast. If you're listening after the fact on your favorite podcast listening platform, please make sure to subscribe and join us live at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Thursday for the Practitioner Brief. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at KnowBe4 and Wistic. Their links can be found in the show notes below. Check them out. Great solutions and great supporters of our show. We're going to get right into today's show, but before we do that, join me for a cup of coffee this morning. I am on my usual double espressos. It's the only thing I can drink. I can't drink black coffee. I think I've said it like 150 times, but love to hear what coffee y'all are drinking this morning as well. Maybe one day someone will be brave enough to try to convince me to try real black coffee again. Maybe. Brave. Maybe. We'll see. All right. Let's get right into today's top stories. We're going to talk about them from a risk, impact, and mitigation perspective. So this new story coming out according to ThreatPost and multiple other sources talks about the new Agent Tesla Trojan, which essentially kneecaps Microsoft's anti-malware interface. The new version of the Agent Tesla RAT can kneecap endpoint protection, often supported by Microsoft's ASMI. So researchers at Sophos have identified that the remote access Trojan that can target Windows anti-malware interface, which is used by many organizations to really protect their PCs. And so the newly discovered variant has adopted a new obfuscation capability, raising the stakes for businesses to fend off the ever-evolving Agent Tesla malware, which has caused chaos in this part of the world and many others. So chiefly among them, here's the deal. It gets in, and there's details over what it does, but essentially to avoid detection, what it does is the ACMI, which allows applications and services to integrate with any anti-malware product that's really present on the machine. The malware now added a capability to essentially conceal its communication and be able to exfiltrate data. So this is significant. It has great risk for organizations because our standard EDR products or anti-malware products now could be essentially overcome. So this requires a little bit more of dedication and a little bit more of upgrades, meaning looking at our security controls and upgrading our security controls around email, because we know that the way Agent Tesla's typically, traditionally, always made it in has been through email attachments. So how do we address email attachments and so forth? And then how do we essentially ensure that this does not take place? There's a bunch of new features with this specific Agent Tesla that's been significantly upgraded and poses a real significant challenge. It's been a 7-year threat, and it accounts for 20% of all malware email attachments detected. So Agent Tesla has been upgraded. It can now bypass Windows anti-malware solution. So you really do want to do defense in depth here and not just rely on one. Most people rely on one antivirus or one EDR product. You do want to have a level off. So one is responsible for one thing, another is responsible for something, and maybe a third one that's really kind of backing up the other three. Those are critical. Also look, because it comes through attachments, looking at a CDR product might be extremely helpful. If you don't have CDR, content disarm, and reconstruct, those are brilliant for stuff like this, especially because they're able to take it apart and really address it. So keep that in mind. So our next story for the day is Google patches over a dozen high-severity privilege escalations in Android. If you are using any Android devices within your environment or personally, there's now, I think, a total of 40 vulnerabilities, according to this report, that have been taken care of by Google. So just ensure that you're upgrading all your Android devices. And if you're in an organization where you have an Android app, just make sure you address these as well in your next update. Let's move on to this next one. I think this story is far more has far more greater implications for cybersecurity organizations, which is the Trickbot malware that's now mapping victims' networks using Masscan. So Trickbot's been around since 2016. It's a banking malware. It's a banking Trojan. That's how it's traditionally been done. It's there to steal your credentials. It's there to create, it's a pure financial malware. It's out there to steal credentials in order to be able to perform either ransomware attacks or financial theft. That's what it does. So the new Trickbot malware has now been upgraded with a network reconnaissance module that's really designed to survey local networks after infecting a victim's computer. And the new module, which is dubbed the MassServe, uses the open source Masscan tool, which is a massive port scanner with its own TCP/IP stack and capable of scanning large swath of the internet in a matter of minutes. This is still being tested, but currently it's deployed as a Windows DLL file with a 32-bit and a 64-bit architecture, depending on the system the malware has infected. Both DLLs were observed are debug builds and their executions into standard output, according to Crypto's Logic Vantage team in the report that they published on Monday of this week. There are common methods that it's being used essentially as in the test phase of this, but this is significant because it's previously released a standalone reconnaissance tool known as Lightbot. In that form of the PowerShell script that was used for scoping out infected computers and high-value targets, now they're trying to map the networks to understand what other open port is available on the network, what else can they exploit to really up their game. So make sure from a mitigation perspective, upgrading your firewall, ensuring that you're really controlling connections that are coming in and closing ports that you don't need to have open. That's basic ABC here. All right. Our final story for today's practitioner brief comes on behalf of SolarWinds. I haven't really talked a lot about SolarWinds, but now there's China-linked hackers that have exploited the SolarWinds flaw in the U.S. government attack, according to reports. Hackers believed to be from China have exploited vulnerabilities in a SolarWinds product as part of a campaign targeting at least one U.S. government agencies. This, according to a report yesterday by Reuters. The supply chain attack, which has been linked also to Russian threat actors, involved the breach of SolarWinds. In the case of Supernova, however, which we discussed several weeks ago, the attackers have apparently didn't gain access to the SolarWinds system. Instead, they exploited a zero-day vulnerability in the Orion platform, delivered the Supernova malware only after they gained access to the targeted networks. SolarWinds patched the vulnerability and that flaw. However, Reuters learned from people with knowledge of the investigation into Supernova that the infrastructure tools and tools that were used in the attack provided a link to cyber spies believed to be backed by the Chinese government. SolarWinds has said they're aware of a single customer that's been targeted. Nonetheless, it's a government customers. The National Finance Center, the NFC, an agency within the U.S. Department of Agriculture that reportedly handles payroll for several government organizations, including the State Department, FBI, Treasury, and DHS. This is on the same level of OPM, essentially. And if you don't know, OPM, Office of Personnel Management, 2014, one of the largest national security breaches pre-Edward Snowden. This is extremely significant and poses a significant threat. China has obviously denied being responsible for it, but attribution has already been made, and the TTPs indicate that this was China. That's it for our practitioner brief today. Before we sign off, though, I do want to say one thing. Yesterday, we lost 2 law enforcement officials, 2 very brave FBI agents in the line of work. So our thoughts go out to our friends over at the FBI today, who are whose flag flies at half staff because of the actions of one man in a child exploitation ring. I know that one of the FBI agents was a huge cyber safety advocate and part of the Miami cybersecurity community. So our thoughts and prayers goes out to to their direct family and friends, as well as to our friends and family over at the FBI who do just amazing work day in and day out. That's it for the practitioner brief today, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to comment. Let us know what you think. We'll be back with more tomorrow to wrap up this week. Until then, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.